Research Station Kepler-9 drifted in the shadow of a gas giant that painted everything in shades of amber and copper, its massive storms creating light shows that would have been breathtaking if Dr. Emma Walsh hadn't been staring at the same atmospheric data for the past 6 hours. The numbers were beautiful in their own way, elegant mathematical descriptions of wind patterns that could tear apart starships, but beauty didn't change the fact that her eyes felt like someone had filled them with sand. "Coffee break," she announced to the empty laboratory, pushing back from her workstation. The atmospheric analysis could wait another 20 minutes, especially since the gas giant wasn't going anywhere and neither was the data. The station's common area buzzed with the usual mixture of human chatter and alien communication methods that created a symphony of universal scientific frustration. Dar. Patel was arguing with the food synthesizers again, convinced that they were deliberately ruining his attempts to recreate proper Earth cuisine. The Kthari researchers communicated in rapid-fire clicking sounds that Emma had learned meant they were either discussing quantum mechanics or complaining about the temperature controls. With the Kthari, these topics were apparently equivalent. "Emma," called Dr. Sarah Kim from across the room. "Come meet our new atmospheric specialist. She just arrived on the supply transport." Emma looked up from her coffee, which tasted like someone had dissolved boot leather in lukewarm water, to see Sarah standing beside someone who made her forget all about atmospheric data and caffeine deficiency. The newcomer was tall, graceful, and unmistakably alien, with the distinctive elongated ears that marked her as Narrated. But where most Narrateds Emma had met possessed the pale, almost translucent skin of deep ocean dwellers, this woman had a subtle luminescence that seemed to shift with her movements, like moonlight on water. "Dr. Walsh, meet Dr. Zara Veltane," Sarah said. "She's joining our atmospheric dynamics team." Zara, Emma's our lead xenobiologist and the person who knows more about gas giant ecosystems than anyone else in this sector. "Dr. Walsh," Zara said, extending her hand in the formal human gesture she'd obviously learned for interspecies professional interactions. Her voice carried the musical quality that all Narrateds possessed, like speaking through water. "I look forward to collaborating on your atmospheric research." Emma shook the offered hand, noting that Zara's skin felt slightly cool and had an interesting texture, not unpleasant, just different enough to remind her that she was touching someone who had evolved in an entirely different environment. "Welcome to Kepler-9. I hope you'll find our facilities adequate. They're not much to look at, but the view is spectacular. I am sure I will adapt satisfactorily." The politeness was perfect, professional, and somehow felt like a wall built from very cordial bricks. Emma had worked with enough alien species to recognize the signs of someone maintaining careful emotional distance, but something about Zara's formal manner suggested it was more than just professional caution. Zara's published some fascinating papers on atmospheric pressure dynamics in aquatic environments, Sarah continued. Her theoretical models for gas-liquid interface behaviors could revolutionize our understanding of gas giant formation. Really? Emma's scientific curiosity overcame her social awkwardness. "I've been struggling with pressure differential calculations in the lower atmospheric layers. Traditional models don't account for the exotic chemistry we're seeing in the storm systems." For the first time, Zara's formal mask slipped slightly, revealing genuine interest. "You're working with storm system chemistry. What kind of exotic compounds are you detecting?" "Metallic hydrogen formations that shouldn't be stable at those pressures, combined with crystalline structures that seem to be self-organizing into complex patterns. It's like the atmosphere is trying to become solid matter." Zara's ears perked forward, a distinctly non-human gesture that somehow made her more approachable rather than less. "Self-organizing crystalline matrices in gaseous environments? That should be thermodynamically impossible." "Should be, yes. Is happening anyway, definitely. Want to see the data?" What followed was 3 hours of the most stimulating scientific discussion Emma had experienced in months. Zara's approach to atmospheric dynamics was unlike anything she'd encountered. Intuitive, almost artistic, based on principles that treated gas giant atmospheres as living systems rather than mechanical phenomena. Her insights into pressure dynamics opened up entirely new avenues of research that Emma hadn't even considered. Your data collection methods are very thorough, Zara observed, studying Emma's measurement protocols. But I think you may be missing some interactions that occur on longer timescales. Longer how? Narrated atmospheric science incorporates tidal influences and seasonal cycles that span decades. We observe patterns that human science might categorize as noise or random variation. Emma felt the familiar excitement of discovering a new perspective on familiar problems. Could you show me? I mean, if you have time. I know you're probably still settling in, Anne. I would be pleased to share Narrated analytical techniques, Zara said, and for a moment her formal politeness seemed to soften into something more genuine. Perhaps tomorrow, after I have reviewed your existing data sets. That would be amazing. Thank you. Zara nodded politely and gathered her materials. Until tomorrow, Dr. Walsh. Emma watched her leave, noting the fluid grace with which she moved and the way other station personnel stepped aside to give her space. Nereidans were rare in human space, their aquatic homeworld making travel difficult and their culture emphasizing long-term thinking that didn't always mesh well with human project timelines. You're staring, Sarah observed, settling into the chair Zara had vacated. I'm thinking. About atmospheric pressure dynamics. Among other things. Sarah grinned. She's brilliant, isn't she? And before you ask, yes, she's single. The Narrated delegation mentioned that she's never formed a bonding partnership. I wasn't going to ask that. You were thinking it loud enough that the Kthari picked up on it. They've been clicking about human mating behavior observations for the past 10 minutes. Emma groaned. Wonderful. Now I'm going to be a xenobiology case study. Could be worse. You could be trying to figure out how to impress someone whose species communicates primarily through bioluminescent displays and chemical signals that you can't even detect. Thanks for the encouragement. Anytime. Just remember, interspecies relationships require patience, cultural sensitivity, and a really good translator app. Emma stared out at the gas giant's swirling storms, already planning tomorrow's research session and trying not to think about how Zara's laugh had sounded like music played through crystal. 3 weeks of working with Zara had taught Emma several important things about Narrated science, atmospheric dynamics, and her own capacity for intellectual attraction. Zara's approach to research was like watching poetry written in mathematics, intuitive leaps that somehow landed on solutions Emma would have needed weeks to calculate, combined with an understanding of long-term atmospheric patterns that made human meteorology look like guesswork. The crystalline formations you detected, Zara explained, manipulating a three-dimensional holographic model of the gas giant's lower atmosphere, they follow tidal patterns influenced by the planet's 7 moons. But the cycle completes every 43 years. Emma stared at the display, watching decades of atmospheric data compress into elegant spiraling patterns. You're saying the entire atmospheric chemistry operates on generational timescales? Precisely. What appears chaotic to short-term observation reveals deep structure over extended periods. It is similar to how Narrated social patterns emerge. Your social patterns operate on 43-year cycles. Zara's ears colored slightly, a subtle shift that Emma had learned indicated mild embarrassment. Narrated courtship and bonding behaviors follow similar long-term patterns. We do not rush into emotional commitments. How long is typical? For a complete bonding partnership? Usually several years of careful evaluation and compatibility assessment. Emma tried not to think about the implications of this information. Several years just to decide if you like someone. To decide if two individuals can create a stable, long-term emotional and intellectual partnership that will endure for centuries. Nereidans have extended lifespans, hasty emotional decisions can have very long consequences. Right. That makes sense. Emma turned back to the atmospheric data, trying to focus on science rather than the way Zara's luminescent skin patterns shifted when she was deep in thought. So these crystalline matrices, they're essentially atmospheric memory storage. An excellent analogy. The gas giant remembers its history in molecular form, creating structures that encode information about past atmospheric states. Similar to how Narrated bioluminescence can encode complex emotional and historical information in light patterns. Emma watched Zara work, noting the unconscious way her skin would pulse with soft blue-green patterns when she was concentrating. Those light patterns, are they involuntary? Partially. Basic emotional states produce automatic responses, but complex communications require conscious control. It is, how do humans say, like facial expressions combined with sign language? Can you teach me? I mean, just the basics. For better scientific collaboration. Zara paused in her data manipulation, her ears twitching with what Emma hoped was consideration rather than annoyance. Human eyes cannot perceive all the spectral ranges involved, but perhaps some simple patterns. What followed was an hour of the most fascinating communication lesson Emma had ever experienced. Zara's skin could produce patterns ranging from simple emotional indicators. Contentment was a steady golden glow, curiosity manifested as spiraling blue highlights, to complex ideographic displays that conveyed abstract scientific concepts through pure light. This is incredible, Emma breathed, watching Zara demonstrate a pattern that somehow expressed the concept of gravitational influence on atmospheric density gradients. It's like having a visual language for ideas that don't translate into words. Narrated children learn light speech before vocal communication. It is more precise for complex concepts. Zara's pattern shifted to what Emma recognized as modest pleasure. You learn quickly for a human. I have a good teacher. Their collaboration intensified over the following days, with Emma's human analytical methods complementing Zara's intuitive understanding of atmospheric behaviors. They developed new measurement techniques that combined human instrumentation with Narrated sensory capabilities, creating research protocols that neither species could have achieved alone. The breakthrough came during a particularly complex analysis session when Emma realized that Zara's bioluminescent responses were actually providing real-time feedback about atmospheric data accuracy. You're not just analyzing the information, Emma said excitedly, you're feeling it. Your light patterns change when the data resonates with your understanding. Narrated's experience mathematical harmony as a physical sensation, Zara confirmed. Correct equations feel right. Harmonious. That's amazing. You're like a living accuracy detector. And you, Zara said, her patterns shifting to what Emma had learned indicated warm appreciation, see connections that would take most Narrated's years to recognize. Human pattern recognition is remarkably sophisticated. They were celebrating their latest discovery, a correlation between atmospheric crystalline formation and planetary magnetic field fluctuations that could predict storm systems decades in advance, when Emma made her mistake. Caught up in the excitement of their shared breakthrough, buzzing with the intellectual high of collaborative discovery, she turned to Zara with a huge grin and kissed her. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Zara's bioluminescent patterns exploded into brilliant, harsh patterns that Emma's human eyes couldn't fully interpret but that clearly conveyed shock, violation, and fury. Zara jerked backward, her luminescence cycling through what looked like the visual equivalent of shouting, and then. To Emma's complete horror, she spat directly in Emma's face. How dare you, Zara said, her musical voice sharp with anger. How dare you claim bonding rights without protocol, without permission, without understanding? Zara, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. You didn't mean. You forced physical intimacy without courtship, without evaluation, without respect for my autonomy. Her patterns were cycling through angry reds and violent purples that hurt to look at directly. This is assault by Narrated law. Emma wiped Zara's saliva from her face, her cheeks burning with shame and confusion. We made this amazing discovery, and I was excited, and humans sometimes kiss when they're happy. I am not human. Zara's luminescence flared so brightly that the laboratory's automatic lighting dimmed in response. I am not your property to claim with casual gestures. Before Emma could form a response that might begin to address the magnitude of her mistake, Zara had swept from the laboratory, leaving behind only the fading scent of ozone and Emma's crushing realization that she had just destroyed the most important professional and personal relationship of her life through sheer cultural ignorance. The aftermath was swift and brutal. By the next morning, Zara had formally requested transfer to another research facility, citing irreconcilable cultural differences and inappropriate human behavior. The station's administration called Emma in for a formal meeting about interspecies workplace conduct, and her colleagues began treating her with the careful politeness reserved for someone who had committed an unspecified but serious social transgression. Emma spent that night staring at the gas giant storms, wondering how someone trained in xenobiology could have made such a fundamental mistake about alien culture, and whether there was any way to repair the damage she'd caused to the most brilliant, beautiful, and now thoroughly alienated woman she'd ever met. Emma's crash course in Narrated cultural anthropology began at 0400 hours with every xenocultural database the research station could access, continued through breakfast with 3 different academic papers on interspecies communication protocols, and reached peak desperation around noon when she found herself practicing bioluminescent pattern recognition with a broken holographic projector and a lot of wishful thinking. The traditional Narrated apology for unauthorized physical contact, she read from her tablet, involves a 26-step ritual of acknowledgement, contrition, and cultural education that must be performed in the correct sequence over a period of no less than 18 days. 18 days? Dr. Patel looked up from his ongoing war with the food synthesizers. What happens if you skip steps? According to this, skipping steps transforms the apology into an even worse insult, roughly equivalent to claiming that the offended party's culture is too primitive to deserve proper respect. So you have to get it perfect or you make everything worse. Apparently. Emma scrolled through more cultural documentation, her head spinning with complex social protocols that made human dating look simple by comparison. Also, the apology has to be performed using correct bioluminescent displays, which I can't actually produce because I lack the necessary organs. Could you use technology to simulate the light patterns? I thought of that, but according to this paper, artificial bioluminescence for cultural rituals is considered mockery unless performed by someone who has undergone formal training in Narrated cultural exchange programs. Patel shook his head sympathetically. You've managed to insult someone in a way that requires specialized education to properly apologize for. That's actually impressive. Thanks. That makes me feel so much better. Emma's research revealed the depth of her cultural ignorance in increasingly uncomfortable detail. Narrated society operated on principles of extended evaluation and gradual intimacy that treated sudden physical contact as a form of violence. What she had interpreted as a spontaneous expression of shared joy, Zara had experienced as an unprovoked assault on her personal autonomy. The more she read, the worse she felt. And the worse she felt, the more determined she became to find a way to make proper amends. Her first attempt involved leaving a formal written apology outside Zara's quarters, composed according to traditional Narrated protocols and translated using the station's best linguistic software. She returned the next day to find the message exactly where she'd left it, unopened. Her second attempt was more ambitious. A holographic display in the station's main corridor that cycled through basic Narrated light patterns expressing contrition, respect, and request for forgiveness. This succeeded primarily in confusing the Kthari researchers, who interpreted the lights as either a mating display or a territorial challenge and responded with agitated clicking that lasted for hours. You're going about this wrong, Dr. Kim told her after the holographic incident had been diplomatically shut down. You're trying to apologize using Narrated methods, but you're still thinking like a human. What do you mean? You're treating this like a problem to be solved quickly and efficiently. But Narrateds don't operate on human timescales. If you want to apologize properly, you need to demonstrate that you understand the value of patience. This insight led to Emma's third approach. Instead of grand gestures, she began making small, consistent efforts to learn about Narrated culture without expecting immediate forgiveness. She studied their scientific methods, their philosophical approaches to research, their historical relationship with atmospheric sciences. She learned that Narrateds had been studying gas giant dynamics for centuries before humans left Earth, developing sophisticated models based on deep-time observation and intuitive understanding of fluid behaviors. The breakthrough came during a station-wide emergency when a solar flare overloaded the primary power grid and left them running on backup systems that weren't designed to maintain life support indefinitely. Emma was working frantically to recalibrate the atmospheric processors when she realized that Zara was in the deep station laboratory, trapped by emergency lockdown protocols with failing life support. Emergency override authorization required for Section 7 access, the computer announced in its maddeningly calm voice as Emma tried to force the sealed doors. "Computer, this is Dr. Walsh. I need immediate access to Laboratory 7. We have personnel trapped inside. Access denied. Emergency protocols require Section Chief authorization. The Section Chief is Dr. Veltane, who is currently trapped inside the section you won't let me access. Authorization loop detected. Please consult station administration for resolution." Emma stared at the sealed door in frustration, then at the emergency tool kit mounted nearby. Sometimes, she reflected, the direct approach was the only approach that worked. 20 minutes later, she'd managed to manually override the door seals using techniques that would probably void the station's insurance policy. She found Zara unconscious at her workstation, the laboratory's life support having failed completely while she'd been trying to maintain atmospheric stability for the rest of the station. Emma carried Zara to the emergency shelter, a cramped space designed for short-term survival during system failures, and worked to stabilize her vital signs using the medical training that all xenobiologists received for working with diverse species. Zara's bioluminescent patterns were dim and erratic, cycling through colors that Emma now recognized as distress signals. When Zara finally regained consciousness, she found herself lying on an emergency cot with Emma monitoring her vital signs through a portable medical scanner. "What happened?" she asked weakly. "Solar flare knocked out primary power. You were trapped in Lab 7 when life support failed. I may have broken several emergency protocols getting you out." Zara tried to sit up, then thought better of it as her bioluminescent patterns flickered with obvious disorientation. "You came for me. After what I said to you." "Of course I came for you. You're my colleague. And..." Emma hesitated, then decided honesty was probably the least she owed. "And I care about you. I know I hurt you, and I know I violated your cultural boundaries, but that doesn't mean I wanted you to die because of my mistakes." Zara was quiet for a long moment, her light patterns slowly stabilizing into steadier colors. "You studied Narrated cultural protocols." "I tried to. I'm probably getting most of it wrong, but I wanted to understand why what I did was so harmful. I wanted to understand you. Most humans would have assumed I overreacted. Most humans don't know enough about Narrated culture to have opinions about appropriate reactions." Emma adjusted the medical scanner, noting that Zara's vital signs were returning to normal ranges. "I'm sorry, Zara. Not just for kissing you without permission, but for being so ignorant about what that meant to your people. I should have learned about your culture before making assumptions about appropriate behavior. You are learning now. I'm trying to. Though I have to admit, 18-day apology rituals are somewhat outside my area of expertise." For the first time since the incident, Zara smiled, a genuine expression that made her luminescent patterns pulse with warm golden light. "Perhaps we could begin with a shorter version." The emergency shelter's cramped quarters forced a proximity that normal circumstances would never have allowed, creating an intimate space where conversations could happen without the formal barriers that had defined their previous interactions. Emma found herself learning about Zara's world through stories shared in the soft glow of emergency lighting and the gentle pulse of bioluminescent patterns that painted shifting colors across the shelter's metallic walls. "On Nereid Prime," Zara said, her voice soft in the confined space, "courtship begins with shared observation of deep ocean currents. Partners spend months learning each other's rhythm, their response to tidal changes, their harmony with the planet's emotional cycles." Emotional cycles. Our homeworld's magnetic field fluctuates with the movement of its 3 moons, creating electromagnetic patterns that influence Nereidan emotional states. Bonding partners must be compatible across all tidal phases, all emotional seasons. Emma listened, fascinated by the complexity of a culture that treated love like an environmental science. And physical contact comes much later, after bioluminescent compatibility has been established, after chemical resonance has been tested, after both partners have demonstrated their ability to maintain harmony during emotional storms. Zara's patterns shifted to deeper blues. What you did was equivalent to claiming full bonding rights without any of the preliminary protocols. I'm beginning to understand why you reacted so strongly. I have never experienced unsolicited physical intimacy. In Narrated culture, such contact implies a commitment that spans decades, perhaps centuries. Your kiss suggested that you believed we had already completed compatibility evaluation and moved to final bonding stages. Emma felt heat rising in her cheeks. And spitting. Rejection of false bonding claims. It dissolves any residual chemical traces and serves as public notice that no partnership has been established. Zara's patterns flickered with what might have been embarrassment. It is, rather dramatic by human standards. Just a bit. They worked together to maintain the shelter's life support systems, their collaboration taking on new dimensions as Emma learned to read Zara's bioluminescent communications and Zara adapted to human verbal expression patterns. The crisis forced them to rely on each other's expertise, Emma's knowledge of human emergency systems and Zara's understanding of atmospheric chemistry, creating solutions that neither could have developed alone. Your approach to problem solving, Zara observed as Emma jury-rigged an air recycling system using spare parts in creative engineering, it is very immediate, very adaptive. Human survival philosophy. When things go wrong, fix them fast with whatever's available and worry about elegance later. Narrated survival philosophy emphasizes preparation, long-term planning, and harmony with natural cycles. Sounds like our species could learn from each other. Perhaps they could. The power grid restoration took another day, during which Emma and Zara found themselves sharing not just technical expertise but personal stories, fears, and the loneliness that came with being dedicated scientists working far from home. Emma learned about Zara's decision to leave the deep ocean cities of Narrated Prime for the isolation of human research stations, driven by curiosity about atmospheric sciences that her own people considered too abstract for practical study. I am the only Narrated working in gas giant atmospheric research, Zara confided as they monitored the shelter's environmental systems. My people excel at understanding water-based atmospheric dynamics, but gas giants are too alien even for us. Is that why you're here? To study something your own people can't understand? Partially. Also because I wanted to understand how other species approach scientific problems. Narrated science is beautiful, but it is also limited by our cultural need for harmony and consensus. And human science? Human science is chaotic, unpredictable, willing to pursue ideas that might be completely wrong. It is terrifying and fascinating. You're describing me personally, aren't you? Zara's patterns shifted to warm gold mixed with gentle blue, combinations that Emma was learning indicated affection tinged with amusement. You are very much what I expected human science to be. Brilliant, impulsive, somewhat dangerous. Is that good or bad? It is, intriguing. When the power grid finally stabilized and the emergency ended, Emma expected Zara to maintain the professional distance that had characterized their relationship before the crisis. Instead, she found Zara waiting in her quarters that evening, her bioluminescent patterns cycling through complex displays that Emma couldn't fully interpret but that felt like tentative invitation. I have been thinking, Zara said, about cultural exchange and compatibility evaluation. And I believe we should begin proper Narrated courtship protocols. Modified for interspecies circumstances and accelerated for human time preferences. Emma felt her heart skip. Accelerated how? Instead of years, perhaps months. Instead of formal tidal observations, perhaps shared research projects that reveal emotional harmony under various pressures. And the physical contact restrictions? Gradual progression based on demonstrated compatibility and mutual consent. with clear communication about boundaries and cultural significance. Emma smiled, feeling hope for the first time since her disastrous mistake. I'd like that. Though I should warn you that I'm probably going to need a lot of guidance about proper protocols. I am an excellent teacher. And I'm a very stubborn student. I have noticed. 6 months later, their joint research had revolutionized atmospheric science and their personal relationship had evolved through careful stages of Narrated-approved intimacy. Emma had learned to read Zara's bioluminescent communications with remarkable fluency, while Zara had adapted to human emotional expression patterns that no longer seemed alien or threatening. The final breakthrough came not in their scientific work but in their personal relationship, when Zara formally initiated the Narrated ritual of sleep sharing, the ultimate expression of trust and intimacy that marked the transition from courtship to permanent bonding partnership. Are you certain? Emma asked as Zara's patterns shifted to the deep, steady rhythms that indicated complete emotional openness. I am certain that you are worth learning new ways of loving, Zara replied, settling into Emma's arms with the fluid grace that characterized all her movements. And I am certain that some human customs, properly understood and consensually applied, have their own beauty. Emma held her gently, marveling at the trust implicit in Zara's relaxed posture and the way her bioluminescent patterns had settled into the steady, synchronized rhythms that indicated complete contentment. The same woman who had spat in fury at her presumptuous kiss now rested peacefully against her, breathing steadily in the shared rhythm of partners who had learned to love across the vast spaces between worlds. Sweet dreams, Emma whispered, watching the gentle play of light across Zara's skin as she drifted toward sleep. Sweet currents, Zara murmured back, using the Narrated equivalent that spoke of peaceful tides and harmonious depths. Outside their quarters, the gas giant continued its eternal dance, its atmospheric storms encoding stories that would take decades to read completely. But inside, two scientists who had learned to bridge the gap between species slept peacefully together, their love having grown from misunderstanding into something deeper than either culture had prepared them to expect.